That squeezy bear in your cupboard might not actually be honey. In November 2024, the Honey Authenticity Network UK bought 25 jars of honey from Britain's biggest supermarkets and sent them off for DNA testing, alongside 5 jars bought straight from UK beekeepers. Every single beekeeper jar came back genuine. Of the 25 from supermarket shelves, 24 came back flagged as suspicious. That's 96%. To be precise about what that word means, a suspicious result is a statistical flag, markers that don't match a reference database of genuine honey, not a courtroom-grade proof of adulteration. The UK's own government chemist has said as much in writing, but a flag on 24 out of 25 jars isn't nothing either, and it's the closest thing to a nationwide test this category has ever had. Here's how that's even possible. UK law says honey has to be exactly one thing: nectar collected by bees, passed mouth to mouth through the hive, sealed in the comb, and left to ripen on the bee's own terms. Nothing added, nothing taken away, nothing sped up. But only 14% of the honey eaten in this country is actually produced here, and on supermarket shelves specifically, British honey makes up just 5% of what's for sale. The rest, around 62,000 tons a year, is imported, and 77% of that comes from China. In 2024, the average landed cost of that Chinese honey was 84 pence a kilo. Compare that with £2.10 a kilo for Mexican honey, or £14.70 a kilo for the New Zealand honey most Manuka claims are built on. When one country's honey costs a 20th of another's, something in the process is different, and it usually isn't the bees. 2 things make that gap possible. The first is vacuum drying. Real honey is dehydrated slowly, inside the hive, by bees fanning it with their wings for weeks. An estimated 75% of Chinese honey instead goes through industrial vacuum dryers, which do the same job in hours rather than weeks, at a fraction of the cost, harvested earlier than a hive would naturally release it. Whether that still legally counts as honey is genuinely disputed. Talks on an international ISO standard for honey stalled for exactly this reason, and the UK government has voted against a draft that would ban vacuum-dried honey from being called honey at all. The second, cheaper and harder to detect, is straightforward dilution. Bulking real honey out with sugar syrup made from rice, corn, or sugar beet. And here's the part that actually protects the fraud. There is no single test that can prove it. Isotope analysis catches corn and cane syrup, but usually misses rice and beet syrup. Nuclear magnetic resonance spectroscopy builds a chemical fingerprint, but it's only as good as the database of genuine honey it's compared against, and those databases are patchy and largely unpublished. The November 2024 test used a newer method called DNA metagenomic analysis, run by an Estonian lab, which compares a sample's genetic material against its own reference database and can flag dilution down to very low levels. It's not beyond dispute. Britain's honey importers, through their trade body, have publicly challenged how reliable that specific test is and called for independently validated methods before its results are treated as conclusive. Every method has a gap, and every gap is where the fraud lives, and where the argument about whose fraud it even is lives too. This isn't a UK-only problem either. In 2023, the European Commission's From the Hives survey tested 320 honey samples from 18 countries and found 46% were suspicious. Honey from China accounted for 74% of everything flagged. And all 10 of the samples specifically traced to the UK, honey imported here, blended in British facilities, then re-exported to the EU market, came back suspicious too. That's not shelf-ready retail honey in that particular figure. It's honey passing through UK blending plants on its way somewhere else, but it tells you exactly what's moving through the same supply chain that stocks British supermarkets. So we ranked 5 ways honey actually ends up on a UK shelf, based on real products and real prices, from lowest risk to the single biggest target for fraud. Number 5. Single origin British honey. Something like Rose's Oxfordshire Wildflower Runny Honey, priced at £4.50 for 225 grams at the time of writing, works out at around £2 per 100 grams, more than 3 times the price of a basic supermarket blend, though like any supermarket price, it moves with promotions. This is genuinely the safer end of the shelf. Every one of the 5 beekeeper-sourced jars in the November 2024 test came back clean. The problem is availability, not honesty. This category makes up roughly 5% of what's actually for sale. Number 4, single-country imports with clear origin labeling. Honey specifically labeled as coming from one country, Mexico for example, landing at around £2.10 a kilo before retail markup. It's still imported, still capable of being adulterated in its country of origin, but a single declared source is at least something a lab or a journalist can trace and check. It's not proof of purity. It's the difference between a paper trail and no paper trail at all. Number 3, blend of non-EU honeys, squeezy bottles. This is the one nearly every household actually buys. Rouse Squeezy Clear. Honey, the 340-gram bottle, is labelled a blend of non-EU honeys and sells for £2, working out at 58 pence per 100 grams, less than a third of the price of the single origin option 2 places above it. This blended, unattributed category is structurally identical to what the Honey Authenticity Network flagged as suspicious in 24 out of 25 retailer jars. Nobody can tell you which country any given squeeze came from, which means nobody outside the packing plant can tell you what's actually in it either. If this is changing how you look at your own cupboard, a like helps more people see it before their next shop. Number 2, honey specifically sourced from China. Even after blending and relabeling under a UK or EU brand, Chinese honey accounted for 74% of everything the European Commission flagged as suspicious in 2023, priced at that 84 pence a kilo that undercuts every other honey-producing country on Earth. Much of it is vacuum-dried rather than hive-ripened, a process that, depending on who you ask at the Food Standards Agency or DEFRA, may not legally qualify as honey under the UK's own 2015 honey regulations. It's still sold as honey on shelves today. Number 1, unverified Manuka. Manuka only comes from the nectar of one bush, native to New Zealand, and its price reflects that, £20 to £60 for a single 250-gram jar. That price gap between Manuka and ordinary blended honey is exactly the kind of gap fraud is built to exploit, and Manuka's narrow specific origin claim makes it one of the easiest health and provenance stories to fake convincingly. The only real safeguard is the UMF trademark, the unique Manuka factor mark licensed by the UMF Honey Association, which confirms the product was actually grown, produced, and packaged in New Zealand under audited standards. A jar that just says Manuka on the front, with no UMF number anywhere on the label, is the single riskiest purchase on this list. That's 5 very different products, 5 very different price points, and one shared thread. The closer a jar of honey gets to looking ordinary and unremarkable, the less anyone is checking what's actually inside it. Here's why nobody's been named and shamed over this. Unlike the supermarkets themselves, honey's supply chain runs through a small number of importers and packers who sell into nearly every retailer at once. One industry source, speaking to trade publication The Grocer, put one company's share of the underlying market at 72% and its share of supermarket own-label honey specifically at around 85%, though the company itself declined to confirm those figures when asked. That company, Valio Foods, owns Rouse, Britain's best-selling honey brand. Its supply chain lead, Tim Red, says Valio tests every batch using sugar profiling, pollen analysis, and a recognized industry method called the AOACC4 test, and that the company has stopped sourcing honey from Ukraine entirely because it can no longer verify authenticity there since the war began. Hilltop Honey, another major supplier of supermarket own-label honey, says much the same. Multiple test types, supplier audits, traceability checks. Both may well be telling the truth. But this is self-testing by importers accused of the exact problem, verified by no outside regulator, published in no database consumers can check. Lynn Ingram, the Somerset beekeeper who chairs the Honey Authenticity Network UK, put it plainly. The market is being flooded by cheap, imported, adulterated honey, and it is undermining the business of genuine honey producers. The public is being misinformed because they are buying what they think is genuine honey. The regulatory response so far has mostly been about agreeing on how to measure the problem, not stopping it. A DEFRA-convened working group spent much of last year building a shared framework so that different labs' authenticity databases can finally be compared consistently with each other. An important technical step, but one that catches nobody by itself. From this June, new EU rules require non-EU blended honey labels to declare the country of origin and percentage share of each honey in the mix, a real, meaningful change. The catch? It applies to honey sold in the EU. Whether and when it gets written into UK law is still, in the trade's own words, expected in due course. Right now, in 2026, the jar on a British shelf still doesn't have to tell you any of that. Even the honey industry's own competition doesn't fully trust its own product anymore. In 2025, the World Beekeeping Awards scrapped its best honey category entirely, citing the risk of unknowingly rewarding adulterated entries. So here's the rule to take to the shop with you. Check the label for a single named country of origin, not a blend of non-EU honeys, or anything similarly vague, since that vagueness is doing real work to protect whoever's behind it. For Manuka specifically, look for the UMF trademark and its accompanying grading number, not just the word Manuka printed on the jar. And treat price as a genuine signal, rather than just a cost. If a honey is priced anywhere near what sugar syrup costs to make, there's a reasonable chance that's closer to what you're actually buying. Where you can, a jar from a named British beekeeper sold at a farmer's market or directly online remains the only category in this entire test that came back 100% clean. To recap, in the only DNA-based test run specifically on UK supermarket honey, 96% of retailer samples came back suspicious, against 0% of the beekeeper honey tested alongside them. There's no single supermarket to point the finger at here because there doesn't need to be one. Most of what's in your trolley, whichever chain you shop at, has likely passed through the same handful of importers and packers, a lot of it starting out in China at under £1 a kilo, dried in an industrial vacuum instead of a hive, protected by a labelling rule that exists now for the EU but doesn't yet apply to the jar actually on your shelf. If this changed how you look at your breakfast, tell us in the comments what's actually written on the honey jar you've got at home right now. And if you think a jar pretending to be pure honey is bad, wait until you see what's really inside a loaf of supermarket bread. That one's still coming.